What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caporoso. Saturday, AM 12 pack, week 8, still 0 wins. Jets Bengals predictions. Also going to answer a couple Discord questions, talk about the latest banter around our New York Jets. I'll get to it right off the top. I don't think the Jets are going to win. I'm not going to pick them to win this game. I don't think that's a stretch. There's a reason they're 7-point underdogs. The last I saw, no Sauce Gardner, no Garrett Wilson. A lot of other backups banged up, but obviously the headlines are no Sauce, no Garrett. Tyrod Taylor, as I'm recording this Friday night, my guess is even though he's been questionable this week, he's ultimately going to start a quarterback. I don't get the caginess, but we'll get to that later. Even if Garrett and Sauce were playing, I don't love picking a team this bad to win on the road, and I shouldn't have picked the Jets to beat the Panthers last week. That was a little insane. I was in a good rhythm of picking them to lose every week, and they were losing every week. I just think with what the Bengals can do on offense, with Flacco just being baseline competent and just throwing it outside the numbers to Higgins and Chase, it's just a very tall order for the Jets. And I think Thomas and even Stevens, to be fair to him, are going to compete on the outside. I don't think they're going to lay down. They're going to make a couple plays. I actually think the Jets will get their first interception of the season in this game. I could see them even having 2 interceptions because Flacco is just going to put it out there, right? Dan did a good job of talking through this on Buck the Trend, but like Chase might have like 21 targets in this game. And you do something like that, like there's going to be a couple errant throws from Flacco. Feels like the kind of game he throws for like 326 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, and the Bengals win pretty comfortably. I think they'll be up 10-0 fast. I think it's like 13-3 at halftime, 16-3 at halftime, and the Jets lose like 27-10 or something along those lines. It's going to be hard. Cincinnati has a bad defense, so in a normal world, you say, all right, we're going to start Tyrod. We're going to run the hell out of the football. We're going to hope Tyrod can hit a couple basic play action passes. It's hard to sell that script when you watched last week where, to Tanner Engstrand's credit, the Jets had a couple guys open and Tyrod just, was underthrew a couple plays that he should have hit, maybe with a little more practice this week if he even got that. He hits those. Brees is banged up. Mason Taylor's banged up right now. They're going to play, but I worry about are they really 100%? And Brees just hasn't been able to get anything going anyway. And your ability to go down the field without Garrett is challenged as well. I do think on defense, the Jets will get Quincy back, which will help. Him and Sherwood running next to each other is better than what they've had. Even though Kiko's had a couple nice moments, he's really a guy you want as a situational backup. I haven't seen reason to believe the Jets can score touchdowns. They haven't scored a touchdown, period, in the last 8 quarters. They haven't scored a non-garbage time touchdown in like 13 quarters. They're just not scoring points and getting the ball in the end zone. So until you could do that, it's impossible to pick a team to win. So if you're betting this game for some reason, I would say you're taking the Bengals to win and to cover. I would kind of skew maybe a little more towards the over in this one because there's also a world the Bengals just put up 40 points because the Jets offense just keeps going 3 and out and 3 and out and 3 and out. And Tyrod, he's thrown a lot of interceptions this year. Like he threw the pick 6 against Tampa. He threw 2 interceptions last week. There's probably going to be some times the Bengals are on a short field. And if Fields does end up playing, he's just going to struggle moving the football. And the Jets will be punting a lot. And that's going to set up opportunities for Cincy. So, it's not like Cincy's a good team. They have a really bad defense. They've struggled a lot this season, but they win this game. They get back to 500. They're still kind of hovering around the divisional race a little bit, especially if the Steelers lose to the Packers Sunday night. So, there's an interesting, from a prop perspective, can you bet on the Jets to have their first interception of the season? Can you always bet over on Sherwood and Quincy Williams tackles? I hit on one of those last week. I just bet the under in Sherwood 5+ tackles, and he gets like 11 tackles every week. That was a nice one. Offensively, you got to stay away from all Jets offensive props. They're just so bad right now, and in that, so unpredictable in how they're going to be bad that I don't like touching anything, even though I think Taylor probably ends up with 3 or 4 catches, and Reynolds probably has 3 or 4 catches, and Brees will probably get 15 touches, probably. I don't know. He's been getting banged up a little bit. It's just not a unit you want to bet on at the moment. Betting Nick Folk field goals always is a safe bet. You feel like he's going to hit at least 2 every single game and doesn't miss any. So you got that going for you. It's not likely to be a pretty one for the Jets before the bye week. I do think they will win a game or two at some point. I don't think this is the one. I think the Browns at home off the bye is a more favorable matchup than this one. And when I look at the remaining games after that, the game at home against Miami is one to keep an eye on. The Saints have been feisty, but they also have some weeks where they just don't have it, and maybe that's one you're competitive in. You can't even say they're going to play the Bills backups anymore because the Bills are in a dogfight, or going to be in a dogfight with the Patriots for the division. There's not really a ton of other ones left. Maybe you get a really bad Trevor Lawrence game and you could steal one against Jacksonville. You get a bad Penix game. You could steal one against Atlanta. You certainly wouldn't expect those things to happen overall. And, once the Jets get through the Bengals and Browns, they have what could be a really ugly stretch where, we think the heat is bad now. After those games, you have the short week in New England Thursday night. New England's likely to be, if you look at their schedule, 7-2. Jets could be 0-9 going into that game. And, we know how Woody and the Jets org feels about being embarrassed not by New England. That's a national TV game. Then you have 10 days and you're in Baltimore. You got to assume Lamar's back. The Ravens are playing better. They're going to need every game desperately. Those 2 games back to back could be some real ugly hours, especially if the Jets are 0-9 going into them. So you hope that they come out like they've been doing on defense and special teams. They continue to compete and allow this game to be close. And if you're in a close game in the NFL, sometimes things break your way, right? You fall on a fumble. Although the Jets never do. You return a kick for a touchdown. Something happens. Flacco has a randomly bad game and throws you a pick 6. Maybe you can steal one, right? And with the Browns, they have a good defense, but their offense is so anemic that you figure that game is going to be like 10-9 in the fourth quarter. Maybe you could grab one before you hit those 2 games that are likely to be pretty damn rough unless something abnormal happens. So, if you're a Jet fan, what are you hoping for? What are you rooting for in this game? And we could put the tank and rooting for wins or losses debate aside on this one. You want to see Azareye'h Thomas show signs in his first start. I think he's going to compete. Again, he's going to have some tough reps. He's going against Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, so let's be mindful of that. You want Malachi Moore to keep building on what's turning into a solid rookie season. You want a good Membu and Olu game. You want Mason Taylor to make some plays in the passing game. You want to see Isaiah Davis do a few things. This might be one of Breece's last games with the Jets ever, so can you get a couple nice moments there? There's not like a ton beyond that. I'd love to see Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson get on the board with a couple sacks. It's been since week 1 since McDonald has had a sack. This week, stepping away from this game, which again, I'm picking the Jets to lose. Let's call it 27-10 overall is my final pick on this one to go to 0-8. It was nice to hear the Jermaine discourse and that he's going to stay. I think if you've been listening the last few weeks, we've been pro that unless it's an insane offer, you want to keep that guy. He's a 3-down edge. He's young. He seems healthy now. He plays with a certain energy and leadership this organization desperately needs. And for as critical as we've been of Glenn and Muji, and I think they've earned every bit of it, there is something notable that Garrett wants to stay here, Sauce wants to stay here, Jermaine wants to stay here. I don't think necessarily the locker room is tuning out Aaron Glenn. I think the Jets are just bad, and I think Glenn and Muji are both learning on the job and making a lot of bad mistakes. And, to that effect, Glenn had another, to reference Dan again, called it like a Tim Robinson skit press conference today where there's a long back and forth about who the quarterback's going to be and Glenn not answering it and saying it's going to be a competitive disadvantage. And I have a little empathy here. Like Glenn, he's clearly not going to answer the question. The media is doing their job trying to press for it. The shtick and the hostility is still a tough look in my eyes. And I'm not trying to, overly, side with the beat or the local media here. It's just optics matter. And it's a hard look when you're 0-7 and you're as uncompetitive as the Jets have been at times. And you're kind of coming off abrasive consistently while making some pretty notable mistakes with your game management. I don't think Aaron Glenn's a bad guy at all, right? And I think he actually has a decent relationship with more members of the press than people might assume he does. He could just do a better job with this stuff and it would make his life easier. And I'm rooting for him to make his life easier because I do think he's going to be their coach still after this year. As of now, they go 0-17, it's a different conversation. They go 1-16, maybe it's a different conversation. For now, I still ultimately think he's going to be back, but he's just kind of regularly in the headlines for tough reasons. And look, people pick on you when you're 0-7, as they should, the last winless team in the league, and they've had a couple embarrassing moments from a coaching perspective. They can't figure out the ends of the halves. They got guys fair catching the ball at the 2-yard line. They can't score touchdowns. Woody Johnson certainly didn't make things easier this week with how public he was with his criticism of Justin Fields. He's not making Glenn's job any easier. So it's just kind of all bad right now. And I don't think it has to be a vortex where everything continues to be fully awful every week. There are a couple things that you're seeing improve slightly week over week, right? We've referenced this a little bit, but Glenn got to the right decision of benching Tony Adams. He finally benched Fields in game, and I think he's going to bench Fields again for this game. Muji, for some of his day 3 misses, which I stand by the take that it's important not to light your day 3 picks on fire. He's made a couple encouraging trades. Like, I think we all feel good about Phillips, Briggs, and Brownlee. I think there's still time for him to have a good second draft and have a good second offseason. And Stevens hasn't been the disaster we thought he'd be. He stabilized a little bit the last few weeks. Let's see how everything else continues to play out. They went and got Kobe King off waivers today, a guy that wasn't our draft guide, who we thought would be like a 5th-round linebacker you would take versus Kiko, who you probably could have got as an undrafted free agent. So it's a roundabout way, but they got there. So it's not like there's been hopelessness in every single transaction they've made. They're going to continue to get pummeled on the Fields thing. And to be fair, there wasn't a lot of options there at quarterback, and they're paying Fields. He's like the 22nd highest paid quarterback in the league or something right now. And this was always a bridge roll of the dice. From the second they made this signing, we said it's more likely than not Fields will not be the quarterback next year. He's probably going to be the backup. I don't know if that's going to be the case now with Woody's comments, but this was always probably most likely headed to the Jets going to get their own quarterback via the draft or a big trade this offseason, which of course is going to dominate a lot of discourse the rest of the season. So there wasn't a ton of great options out there. You could have said, well, why didn't they get Daniel Jones? Daniel Jones wasn't coming back to New York, and the Jets don't have the Jonathan Taylor, Shane Steichen, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Tyler Warren infrastructure that's helping Daniel Jones look the way he is. You see what a guy like Carson Wentz looks like, even though he has KOC and Justin Jefferson. There just wasn't a lot of great options. They could have started Tyrod, I guess, from week 1, but you're seeing some of the flaws there. So I'm not giving them a pass, right? They certainly made their share of mistakes. They left themselves exposed at wide receiver and edge rusher when Jermaine got hurt, and the in-game coaching has been bad. I think if Glenn, and I asked this on Twitter this week, I think if Glenn had been a league average coach to date, the Jets are probably like 2-5 right now, which is what they should be. I think if the Jets, you would have told me after 7, the Jets are going to be 2-5, I would have been like, yeah, they're probably on the trajectory to finish around 7 wins, which is what I thought they would do after the AVT injury. They've left a couple of games on the field that they should have won, and that's just been strictly due to bad coaching and bad game management, and that's on Aaron Glenn, and he has to find a way to get better at that. A lot of the questions I got in the Discord, there was basically one around Brees being traded and one around more of the one and done chatter with Aaron Glenn and comparing him to Gerard Mayo. I still think Brees will probably get traded, and I think it's still going to sting because they're probably getting a 4th or a 5th rounder back for him, and he's going to make some plays elsewhere. I will say there was a time in Brees' career I thought he could be a Jonathan Taylor type player. I don't think he has that in him anymore. He just doesn't have that level of explosiveness and doesn't run hard enough. He could still be a very valuable piece on a really good team. He's very talented still. You're seeing some explosive runs, not the 50-yard runs, but the 10 to 20-yard runs. Catch the football very well. The Jets very well may just be like, hey, we're going to hold on to him because no one else is here to run the football, and we have to run the football a lot, so we're going to keep him. And all we're getting offered is a 6th-round pick, and at that point, you might as well just keep him and see what happens this offseason. But to me, it still feels more likely than not they end up moving him maybe after this game and during the bye week. So this might be the last game we see from him, which would be kind of sad when you think back to what we were seeing from that dude in 2022 and even some moments last year. On the one and done thing with Mayo, I think, as we all know, it was a bit of a unique situation. I think if Vrabel wasn't available and didn't have the Patriots history it did, I think the Patriots probably bring Mayo back for year 2. If a situation like that presents itself, would the Jets, even though they want to keep Aaron Glenn for a second year, or they're paying to keep him for many more years, would they make that kind of jump? I don't know who that guy is, right? You can make a case that if Stefanski gets fired, is he worth doing that for? I think you can make a fair case he is. It's worth that kind of swing for a floor that he would bring, especially with a rookie quarterback. If John Harbaugh happened to be available, but is John Harbaugh going to come here? I don't know. Are the Jets going to do what it takes to get a guy like that? If for whatever reason Baltimore moves off of him, which I think would be a mistake, I don't know what the other names are that they would do that for. They're not going to do it for Jesse Minter or Josh McCown because those guys are also unproven. So I don't see a one-to-one comparison where there's such an obvious thing like Vrabel, who played, for the Patriots and clearly had ties to the org. And once he put himself back out there and the Patriots were as bad as they were last year, they were going to make that move. And, here they are right now. So it's a challenging spot for the Jets. My opinion has not changed from earlier this week. I still think 75-25, Aaron Glenn and Darren Mugier back. I think they sink or swim together. I think the Jets will probably win 2 games before the season ends. I think that's their ceiling, which is such a sad thing to say, but their range of outcomes is 0-17 to 2-15. I'm gonna say they roughly get to 2-15, and they end up keeping the guys, and they draft a quarterback with the first or second pick in the draft. And there's some bigger conversations to have here if these guys are staying, how you add some other pieces to the coaching staff that make life easier for a quarterback. Those are conversations for December and January. I think, again, when you look at this weekend, I'd like to see the defense keep competing the way they have. I do think the defense has played really good football the last 2 weeks, considering where they were in that Dallas game and even parts of the Miami game. So they're shorthanded talent-wise in certain spots, but there's not a lack of effort, energy out there from the defense or the special teams, and really from the offensive line easier. The story of the last 2 weeks has just been horrific quarterback play and not having the horses at the skill positions to compete on a week-to-week basis, and some really bad coaching. Again, I stand by the take that if the Jets benched Justin Fields at halftime of the Broncos game, they would have won the game, and they would have given Tyrod all the starters reps all week before Carolina, and they probably could have won that game too. And that doesn't even factor in could they have won Pittsburgh if they just didn't have Gibson on the roster. So in some ways, they're not quite as far away from just being a normal bad team as they need to be. It feels worse because of some of the way Glenn has been carrying himself and some of the goofy ways the Jets have been managing games. So I hope the dude gets better, and I hope he manages the game well on Sunday, and I hope the Jets find a way to compete. No one wants to see this team go 0-17. I don't think they're going to get their first win Sunday. I do think they will win a game at some point, and I do think everyone is quite happy that the bye week is close, right? From a pure football perspective, it will be good for an extra week for Garrett and Sauce and some of the other guys who are banged up so they could come back for that Cleveland game, which I think is going to be a real opportunity for them to get their first win of the season before a rougher stretch of the schedule. And it will just be good for the coaching staff to get away from everything and try to reset some processes that haven't worked. So that sums it up. That's a 12-pack. Make sure you're tailing along on Underdog. I'll share my pick before kickoff. Make sure you check out the TOJ pod on the feed later today. I got the old TOJ gear on from way back in the day here, but we have a new TOJ shirt for sale. Badlands Dry Fit Tee for sale, which is tremendous. I wear it all the time. And the Jetheads tie-dye. So check those 3 out. We're still pumping those at badlandstoj.com. Jetheads pregame show on our YouTube channel at 11 a.m. Me and Connor on the feed after the game, as always, for post-game therapy, or maybe one of these weeks post-game party. Appreciate everyone continuing to listen. I know we've been, dabbling a little more of this content out on YouTube. I promise if you're seeing this on YouTube, you're only getting 30% of the stuff we do on Patreon. So check out badlandstoj.com. I'm sorry, patreon.com/badlandstoj to subscribe and get everything. Thank you. I will see you on the feed again tomorrow on Sunday after the game. Thanks again.